Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to the ATF battle and cult of WACO. I'm not sure if it's WACO or WACO. So this is a paid request from a good subscriber of mine, Amanda. Shout out to you, Amanda. I literally know nothing about this, but after reading the synopsis of the video, this looks really interesting. So the WACO siege was one of the most controversial law enforcement events in American history. The siege began in early 1993 when a government raid on a compound in WACO, Texas, led to a 51-day standoff between federal agents and members of a millennial Christian sect called the Branch Davidians. Literally never heard of it, but this looks super interesting. It's from Popo Medic. He does a great job of kind of turning these sort of crazy events into like these mini sort of movies with actual footage, of course. So yeah, this should be really, really interesting to watch.
Thursday, February 28th, 1993. A small-town preacher running a religious compound in Waco, Texas, quickly found himself in the middle of a 51-day siege with the FBI, following one of the most televised and disastrous law enforcement raids in American history, creating a barricade situation courtesy of the ATF. FBI negotiators pleaded with the preacher to peacefully exit the compound and surrender, but the FBI quickly learned the man was far from a preacher. He was a deranged cult leader, a self-proclaimed messiah destined to bring the world to end times. And through his dictatorship and weaponization of the Bible, he manipulated and had prepared his followers to fight a holy war against the beasts of Babylon.
Wow. Oh, this looks good. I mean, obviously bad things happened, but this is going to be a hell of a story. 51 days is such a long time to have a stand.
In 1981, 22-year-old Vernon Howell makes his way to Waco, Texas. His dreams of one day becoming a famous rock star were well over, after failing to form a band in Los Angeles. And for the aspiring lead singer, it was a boy's last dream and a man's first loss. And like most young men tasting their first drop of reality, Vernon Howell was in need of guidance and embarked on a spiritual adventure, resorting back to the one thing he was ever good at: his knowledge of the Bible, to which he reportedly memorized by the age of 14. He discovered like-minded individuals.
Is that even possible? I mean, the Bible is a large book with over 1,000 pages. Memorize the whole Bible by that age?
From a fairly new religious movement and splinter group of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who called themselves the Branch Davidians.
The Branch Davidians.
He camped out at the group's compound.
I wonder what was the thinking behind the name, the Branch Davidians. Is there a biblical link there?
The Mount Carmel Center, owned and ran by a George Roden. And over the next 4 years, using his outsider rock and roll persona, people took a liking to Howell, especially the women, even having an affair with Roden's 60-year-old mother, causing such an uproar that Vernon Howell had to flee Mount Carmel Center altogether. And to his surprise, he was followed. Realizing the power he wielded over his fellow Branch Davidians, the covert narcissist, with the same audacity and entitlement to pursue a career as a rock star, pivoted his misguided ego to the lead role within the Branch Davidians. And by 1987, he turned his followers into an armed militia, declaring the Mount Carmel Center was his for the taking, and his rival and the reigning king of the Branch Davidians, George Roden, was in his way. And on November 3rd of 1987, Vernon Howell led an armed group of men into Waco, attacking the Mount Carmel Center. A firefight ensued, and the gun battle lasted for nearly 45 minutes. While firing hundreds of rounds in the middle of a gun battle, Vernon Howell was preaching to his followers, and even shouting scripture directed at Roden. Roden was shot in the finger and was reportedly the only person injured. Vernon Howell and all 8 of his accomplices were rounded up by the sheriffs and indicted on charges for attempted murder. All 9 were tried in a state court, and all 9 were acquitted by a jury.
They were acquitted. Why were they acquitted? And what is it with people always weaponizing religion? You see it all over the world, like people using religion as like I don't know if it's justification or some way of getting people to fight, like conflict. I love the visuals. They're quite cool.
After Vernon Howell's release, George Roden vacated the Mount Carmel Center. Howell paid the property taxes owed and took over, becoming the newfound leader of the Branch Davidians. And under Howell's leadership, the sect of Branch Davidians became reborn into something new altogether. Howell and his followers collected abandoned vehicles, recycled building materials, and acquired an FFL license, selling firearms at gun shows. The money earned was invested back into the community to build bunkers on top of bunkers to further fortify the Mount Carmel compound. And an even larger portion of the money was invested into more firearms to stockpile.
This guy was prepping for war. He was just prepping and prepping. He knew what he was planning.
And increase their inventory for future buyers, and as well as an inventory for themselves.
Wrath and vexing the Lord's pleasure. People are fixing to get an ass kicking.
And by weaponizing the words of the gospel, Howell began decaying the souls of his followers, self-proclaiming that he himself was God in the flesh, the chosen one to interpret the 7 seals of Revelation, pushing an apocalyptic, messianic agenda within the sect, prophesizing his will to bring the universe to end times, resurrecting and initiating the second coming of Jesus Christ. He would change his name to David after King David, and take the surname of Koresh after Cyrus the Conqueror, and the Branch Davidians worshipped their leader, David Koresh. And he began to control every aspect of their lives, from declaring which foods they could eat, to which mothers were fit for motherhood, even claiming through a divine mandate that he must take the wives of other men as his own, and that all other marriages are to be dissolved, and commanding all men within the Branch Davidians to remain single and remain celibate. And through his dictatorship, his abuse, and taking teenagers as wives, the line was drawn in the sand, and those who were against him fled, such as a group of Australian defectors who went to Australian authorities after returning to their native country. And soon after, an Australian news reporter arrived in Waco to question.
I'm sorry, I don't think there's anything you could tell me that could convince me, if I was married, to surrender my wife, to leave my wife so you can have her and I have to remain celibate. There is nothing you could tell me. Any fellas watching this that are married, is there anything anybody could say to convince you to do that? Women watching this, like vice versa? Wow, I mean, he must have really brainwashed these people.
And its members.
Well, a lot of very serious allegations have been made against him and this place. Have you heard those allegations?
No, not that I could.
Allegations that people here are frightened of him, of his behaviour.
Oh no, I'm not frightened of him.
Sure?
Nuh-uh.
What about the girl next to you? What do you think of David?
I think he's great.
Yeah, how old are you?
I'm 16.
16?
16, she's a kid. So is that him? That's him, innit?
The master manipulator prepared his followers for the so-called great battle between the faithful and the beasts of Babylon. David Koresh prepped food, taught survivalism, and prepared his followers for war. And as the sheriffs were notified by UPS employees of a package containing grenades and explosive powders, the Great War was coming. As the ATF were notified and giving Koresh his violent history, information pertaining to reports of automatic gunfire coming from the Mount Carmel Center, the ATF locked in on David and began snooping around for any and all taxable weapons, even sending in undercover Special Agent Robert Rodriguez, who reported that David Koresh was using drop-in Sears to convert semi-automatic rifles to full auto, according to the affidavit. The arrest warrant on David Koresh and the search warrant on the Mount Carmel Center was signed by a judge on February 25th, and the ATF planned a raid that would go down in infamy. And on February 28th, the day of the raid, a tipped-off news reporter on his way to cover the inbound ATF raid stopped and asked a stranger for directions to the Mount Carmel Center, mentioning the ATF spectacle that was soon to be taking place. The stranger whom he stopped was David Koresh's brother-in-law, a Branch Davidian, who fled back to the compound
Of course,
to warn
let
the
them
others
know.
of the incoming raid. The Davidians armed
man.
themselves and took defensive positions against what they interpreted as the beast.
Was all those rifles and stuff, was that the Branch Davidians' weapons? Man, these guys had... That's a lot.
Of Babylon. The agents arrived, hidden within the back of cattle trucks, and began their offensive positions against what they interpreted as the religious group with illegal guns and a history of gun violence. And regardless of the psychologies or theologies of either side, both sides put their quarter in the jukebox.
The soundtrack to this is A1.
The ATF agents hit the ground running, effecting a dynamic entry to capture David Koresh and execute the search warrant. But instead of hitting the Davidians with the element of surprise, gunfire erupted, and whether or not it was the ATF or the Branch Davidians who shot first, all hell broke loose. The Branch Davidians were firing from over 40 different shooting positions. Agents on the ground became pinned down by a barrage of automatic gunfire. A diversion of helicopters arrived, attempting to fly low over the complex as a distraction, but the Branch Davidians shot at the helicopters, and the helicopters were forced to land.
Wow.
Running ladders on the east side of the building, the ATF forced themselves upon the compound, making entry into the building from the roof, walking straight in to a close-quarter battle.
I mean, this is domestic terrorism. Like, what the Branch... They were terrorists. That's what they were. Isn't it insane? Like, this guy, David... He found people that probably wanted to belong somewhere, to like a family, to feel part of something. And he just preyed on them, you know. They were clearly vulnerable because these people are now, they've thrown their lives away for this man. I mean, what kind of person could be, you know, made to do this kind of stuff? It's probably someone who's in a bad spot. Maybe they need a bit of like a big brother type father figure.
The realization sank in that the agents were failing. Half of the team were attempting to enter the compound, business as usual, sticking to the plan. As for the other half, they were pinned down, contagiously shooting at the building with no direction or purpose, recklessly endangering the women and children. A Branch Davidian by the name of Wayne Martin dialed 911.
Yeah, this is Lieutenant Lynch. May I help you? Yeah, there's 75 men around our building, and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel? Yeah, tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
Lieutenant Larry Lynch of the McLennan County Sheriff's Office jumped on the line and hailed ATF agents via radio.
I'm talking with Wayne now. He's inside. They're wanting everybody to back off and talk. I'm trying to get what radio frequency. They told me the radio van. We're not getting a response.
During this time, Deputy Director of the ATF, Dan Hartnett, contacted Washington, D.C., requesting the assistance of FBI negotiators on the scene in Waco. FBI special agents from a nearby field office responded to the scene. And after nearly 2 hours of shooting, and around the same time ATF agents began to run low on ammo, negotiators secured a ceasefire.
But I mean, was this
The
ceasefire...
wounded David Koresh, shot in the wrist and stomach, ordered the Branch Davidians to hold their fire. The ATF extracted 18 of their own who were severely wounded, 4 of which were killed in action. The Branch Davidians recovered 5 of their dead, and it's reported up to 20 Branch Davidians were wounded as a result of the shootout. And the Davidians began to bunker down and barricade inside the compound, believing full well that these were the end times that their leader David Koresh had prophesized. And the ATF, knowing full well that they royally fucked up, handed over the crisis to the FBI.
My name is Jeff Jamar. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI in the San Antonio division, and I'm the special agent in charge of FBI operations here in Waco.
Can you tell us, in talking with Koresh, have you any indication how many people in the compound are dead, how many are wounded, what their condition is?
The people we're talking to say 3 people wounded, to include Koresh. The extent of wounds, we don't know. The extent of his wounds, we don't know.
Channel 13, Eyewitness News, tonight.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. A fanatical, scripture-quoting religious
The cult, actually called or known as the Branch Davidians, is an offshoot of the Seventh-day Advent.
I'm just trying to think. I've never heard of something like that here in the UK. It might have happened, maybe in the 80s, 90s, perhaps. If it has happened, let me know in the comments, but I don't think there's been anything like this, to my knowledge. He kind of reminds me a bit of Charles Manson, this guy.
Church. They broke off from the church and moved out here from Los Angeles back in 1935. But despite the longevity of the cult in and around the WACO area, very few WACO residents that we spoke with had ever even heard of this cult before today.
All across America, all eyes were on WACO. And not even 5 hours after the ceasefire, another Branch Davidian was killed. A man by the name of Michael Schroeder, who had been working during the raid and tried sneaking past ATF agents to return to his people. When he was spotted by ATF snipers and confronted on the ground, agents report that Schroeder was armed with a Glock 19 and opened fire. He was shot 7 times and his body was left where it fell for 5 days.
How many gunshots did you hear?
It was quite a few, you know. Couldn't really say how many it was, but he knew it was something that wasn't normal.
But the FBI was certain nobody else needed to be harmed, and the negotiations with David Koresh began.
How could we save these children and women and...
Give me the coverage.
Okay, I'm going to get your scripture message to the radio station right away.
David refused to surrender, but bargained with negotiators to release 2 children every time they air his message of how God gave him the ability to unlock the 7 seals of Revelation and start the apocalypse via
This
Dallas
man
radio
is
news
nuts.
station KRLD.
My name is Dave Koresh. I'm speaking to you from Mount Carmel Center. First thing that I would like to introduce in our subject is the reasons for the revelation of Jesus Christ.
Over the next 10 days, David consistently released an inconsistent number of both women and children after each broadcast of his sermon.
It's nothing other than my name is Dave, the revelation of Jesus Christ.
21 children have been released since the standoff began February 28th. Most came out with messages from their parents listing relatives that might take them.
And basking in the glory of the third act of his self-proclaimed prophecy, David refused to surrender, believing wholeheartedly that these were the end times.
He's fully deranged. Like, he has drank the Kool-Aid. Like, he's too far gone. This is only ending one way, isn't it?
His word that after the message was
Yes, but what if there is a higher power than you and I that speaks to an individual? If there's a God in this universe, and there's the laws of man and there's the laws of God, and this God that has led him all his life says to him to wait, what do you do?
David Koresh, pick up the phone. Negotiators attempting to get a hold of you. They would like to speak with you.
The FBI grew impatient and began to implement aggressive tactics, beginning with a psyop to prevent the Branch Davidians from sleeping, to entice them to surrender.
Wow, they're playing that it's kind of what happened in the Vietnam War. Just pumping in that sinister audio. Yeah, that'd be horrible to listen to. Even if you could fall asleep, you probably have nightmares because of the subconscious hearing that.
David had a revelation, informing negotiators the end times were no longer coming, and that once he was done penning his manuscript, interpreting the 7 seals, he would come out and surrender with the rest of the children. However, officials reportedly grew concerned after having learned from Texas Rangers of abuse reported by the released children during a series of interviews. United States Attorney General Janet Reno and then President Bill Clinton agreed that getting the remaining children out of the Mount Carmel Center was the #1 priority, even if it meant another tactical resolution.
David, individuals inside the Branch Davidian compound. We are in the process of placing tear gas into the building. Exit the compound now. Submit to the proper authority, David.
Honestly, they should have done this before. They should have done this, already, I think.
Tanks to deploy the tear gas, at which point the Branch Davidians opened fire. Wiretaps revealed the Davidians were also pouring some type of fuel inside the compound.
Oh no!
As different as they were, both sides had so much in common. Both sides endangering the children. Both sides shallow and clueless. Both sides playing God. And a simple lesson in history will teach you.
Is that fair though?
You can't play God without creating hell.
Because the FBI, they just want the situation to be over. Like, what more could the FBI do here? They've negotiated, Madness, mayhem, chaotic vandalism, devastation of innumerable souls, while we scream and perish. History licks a finger and turns the page. Yeah, it's so true. Thomas Ligotti. Everything becomes the past. Man, crazy scenes.
Gonna burn out slowly with my silver and gold. Turn my life into a circus. Go from town to town.
Yeah, you just gotta feel so bad for the kids because they were completely innocent in this, really.
I'm both a lion and clown. What if we start over? Get a second chance.
And I
76
think,
Branch Davidians.
We're always going to have people like this guy, unfortunately. People who think that they are special, that they are worthy of being followed.
Perished in the fire.
76.
27 of which were children.
Oh,
they cannot be proud about what they did on April the 19th.
The events at the Mount Carmel Center sparked both outrage, criminal prosecutions, and civil litigations. Congress held extensive hearings into charges that federal law enforcement officials made serious mistakes.
Earlier in an opening I gave this morning with regard to the Posse Comitatus Act, just to refresh my colleagues' memories, the Posse Comitatus statute is a criminal statute that states that it's a crime to use any part of the Army or Air Force to enforce the laws of the land unless authorized by Congress or the Constitution.
Including the affidavit, which failed to establish probable cause, and the use of pyrotechnic tear gas, which under the right conditions can become extremely flammable. Attorney General Reno defended her actions before the FBI's assault on the cult's compound. Reno was adamant that she alone had made the decision to force the cult leader David Koresh and his followers out of their compound with CS tear gas, and later denied all allegations of the use of pyrotechnics.
I am very, very troubled by the information I received this week suggesting that pyrotechnic devices may have been used in the early morning hours on April the 19th, 1993 at WACO.
However, several munitions of pyrotechnics were recovered from the rubble. Several experts who testified at the hearings stated that the fire was a premeditated decision by the Davidians to burn down the compound.
Because they were pouring flammable liquid. I kind of feel a bit bad for that lady. What was she supposed to do? Like, what was the alternative? What was she supposed to do in that situation? I think they were just looking for a scapegoat, ultimately, to blame. Ultimately, it's this guy who's to blame for this.
And themselves, likely at the orders of David Koresh. And the public demanded answers.
Nobody wants to admit that their government could possibly be guilty of such a thing. But based on what I found out here over the past 5 months, I have no choice but to say that they were.
And the tragedy of Waco echoed into the streets of Oklahoma City.
I guess somebody told me a lot of people are scared to put something on, like this.
And whether or not the fire was caused by the authorities or the Davidians, the real question is, was it worth it? Was it worth showing off to prove a point? The ATF could have simply grabbed David Koresh somewhere in town, but elected to raid, creating a crisis within a crisis.
I see.
And nothing in life is worth risking the life of a child.
Children.
And if there's one thing that those in charge can remember and learn from Waco, it's to ask themselves before acting, is the juice worth the squeeze? Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit...
Wow. Fair enough. I mean, if the possibility to apprehend Koresh was there, just to grab him in town, and they didn't do that, that was a massive oversight. I mean, why wouldn't they just do that if the opportunity was there? But I watched the video, obviously, just now. There was no mention of that. The only thing that I heard was when the police guy, asked for directions of the facility where the Davidians were, and the guy that they spoke to was David's stepbrother or brother-in-law. Like, that was the only... I didn't, unless I missed it, which I don't think I did, there was no mention of David on that day, you know, on the day before the siege and all of that, being, you know, like near the police. But I suppose, yeah, I don't know, but what a story. What a story. It's sad. To me, it really speaks to the fact that society, we've become a bit too, like, the importance of, like, community. You know, if these people who are members of his cult had that community element, that family element that made them feel, you know, wanted, etc., belonging, they probably wouldn't have been able to be swayed by him. And this probably wouldn't have happened, you know. Tragic, but man, what a story. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.